So we've got Anakin's journey. We can see that he starts with a lot of promise and has all of the mentorship and support that you could imagine. He gets some bad advice along the way. He maybe picks the wrong people to trust, right? But he keeps doubling down on his mistakes. He has these weaknesses of quickness to anger and egocentricity and fear and overconfidence in his own abilities, and those things seem to spiral him into a pretty dark place. So
Yeah, and you can see the parallel there, Brian. I mean, the simple one is just when he goes back to Tatooine and he finds his mother, right, Shmi, in the camp with the sand people, and they end up, he's not able to save her, and she's brutally murdered and suffering. And what does he do? He turns around and he leans into his emotions, which we know is very anti-Jedi, and he just kills all the sand people. And then you kind of have that parallel to the moment, which is perhaps the darkest moment in all of Star Wars, right? When he goes to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, and there's the like weird grainy hologram video of him, cutting down these younglings. And it those moments, it seems justifiable, right? When it's the sand people who impacted your family member with that suffering, and that loss eventually consumes you, and the grief, if not processed properly, leads him to become the type of person who can have that same type of moment with completely innocent people, because he has let the anger and the contempt build up in him over time. He's channeling his emotions as a way to, what he thinks, accomplish a mission or objective. But in the end, he can't see anything outside of himself anymore. All he can see is his own self and his own flaws, and it just consumes him.
yeah, and he's not happy about it. Like, he knows that he did a bad thing on Tatooine, and he has angst about that, but then he doesn't change the way he makes decisions, right? He doesn't get any ability to harness himself. He just keeps doing it more, right? And again, this is maybe a thing that's familiar to some of us from our own lives, right? Like this, like, oh, wow, look, I made that terrible decision again. Oh, look at that. I got angry again in a meeting and I said a thing that I shouldn't have said, and I laughed out at somebody that I shouldn't have laughed out at. Like, that's a thing that we do.
Yeah, mine is oftentimes saying something to my wife in a tone that, as I'm saying it to me in my own head, seems like it's going to sound okay, because in the end, my intention was not to be, mean, and my intention was not to be condescending, but apparently, I am not capable of saying it in a way that was that way, which tells me that I need to reevaluate, because if it comes out that way into the world, then there's something in my head, there's something in my mind that is leading it to come out that way.
Yeah, yeah. There are those moments when we're ignorant of our impact we have on others. There's moments when we're so angry that we just don't, we don't care. Like, we're enjoying being angry. But there's also the fear moments where you maybe should be addressing a problem and you're not, because you just don't want to, or you don't want to deal with it, and so you just let something go and go and go, and then it gets out of control, and that's probably my failure mode. So, but I think the thesis of this whole series is that we all have this capacity to be villainous. Like you said, we all have this in us, just as we've been preaching for the last 110 episodes. We all have the capacity to be tremendous, magnanimous, caring, nurturing leaders, right? And it's just different choices. It's just different habits. It's just different patterns over and over again. This is it's an illustrative, as you said earlier, an anti-pattern, right? It's an illustrative pattern of like Anakin makes all the wrong choices and keeps doubling down over them, and so it leads him to a really dark place. So set us up. Where's this lead him? What's our mountaintop moment for this episode?
All right. So the mountaintop moment, to me, is the pinnacle of the prequel trilogy. Now, I know there's a lot of different opinions on this, but we talked about kind of the doubling down that he has on these, the battle with Mace Windu, all of these different moments, basically, the turning to the dark side. And I think it all culminates in the he can never go back moment, which is the lightsaber duel on Mustafar between Anakin and Obi-Wan. Everything in this movie kind of builds up to the point where now you have the mentor who has continually, in Obi-Wan, bent over backwards to try to bring Anakin back. He knows that at first Obi-Wan is blind to it. We do see that, but eventually he does know exactly what's happening, and he is trying and trying to bring him back. He's giving him forgiveness. He's going to continue to try to teach him. And it's builds up to this moment where the two of them duel on Mustafar, and we get the classic, "You were supposed to be the chosen one."
My brother Anakin. Yes, there's a lot of emoting going on in that scene, but and along with lava spewing everywhere, lightsaber duels on floating pods, and yeah, it's over the top as only Star Wars can do, for sure.
It is, right? And you get the build up to the moment where it's over, Anakin, I have the higher ground. And yet he still can't give up. Right? He still can't concede. He just keeps doubling down. No, I'm right. No, I need to be vindicated for all of these things, even to the point where he has his mentor who's willing to sacrifice himself to help Anakin. And Anakin can't see it anymore because he's so blind now by the dark side. He's so blinded by the anger and contempt he's been building up.
Yeah, and he's all about himself, right? And so this is the natural end of this arc is that even the person who is the most committed to him, even the person that is the most willing to forgive him, the most willing to face all of his crap and try to step in anyway, it ends up in open conflict with him, right? And that's exaggerated to the point where it's a lightsaber duel in the lava fields, but it's also like that's a thing, right? Like if you're committed to fighting all the time, if the whole world is black and white and you have to be right and therefore anybody that disagrees with you is wrong, you're gonna end up fighting with everybody. And I think we've all seen people like that, right? We've seen we've had those patterns.
And we've probably seen relationships that either could have gone that way, or we know people who have let relationships go that way. Now, I'm not saying stay in a harmful relationship if it's traumatic for you and continues to be unapologetically harmful to your life. There's definitely times where we need to cut ourselves out of relationships, certainly. But I think we've all probably met people or been people that have had 20-year rifts with a parent over a situation that never got resolved, or something like that lost a friendship that they had for decades over, money or something like that, where they're just, nobody went back and resolved the situation. Neither party was willing to have the humility to just have a conversation about what needed to happen to go forward. And so you end up with this lightsaber duel on Mustafar type moment where, the two brothers are fighting, and in the end, Anakin gets left for dead there. And Brian, what does that turn him into? That he never concedes in that situation. What happens next?
Yeah, he turns into like this, he's locked himself into, there's only one path available to him, right? He's closed off all of the doors that would have potentially let him reflect or improve or, be a positive force in the life around him, in the world around him. And so the only thing that he's got left is to turn into Darth Vader, right? Is to turn into sort of this embodiment of this ego and anger, and using your skills to sort of inflict discomfort on everyone around you.
Oh, and isn't it interesting that Darth Vader and the way that the costume is designed, and we can argue this was not intentional, obviously, with what we know of how Lucas created Vader, but Lucas does masterfully, even in the prequels, kind of weave a story about characters that is transcendent. And Vader, right, his emotions, everything that's inside of Anakin comes out in Vader, and it becomes the only thing left. It's this black and white version of Anakin now, where all he can be is the angry executioner that pursues with single vision his purpose, and nothing can get in his way. There is no shades of gray. There is no balance anymore.
And he is literally wearing the shell, right? He's wearing the armor. Like he doesn't expose his human face. He doesn't interact with other people as a human. He only interacts with people as the shell, as this avatar character that he's constructed, right? And I think that's we all do that to some extent, but when the only tools you have to construct your interactions with others, or to filter your interaction with others, are based on hatred and fear and exerting power when you can, that's a pretty limited life. That's a pretty limited kinds of impact that you can have on the world around you, right? You pretty much narrowed yourself down to one possible kind of career style and one possible set of interactions.
We talk about character as destiny. There's a quote that I'm going to absolutely butcher that says, like, we start with the ability to make choices, that you can choose life or death. Like you said, you always stand at the door. Are you going to choose life or are you going to choose death? It's not always that clear, but in the end, as a human, your character is formed and your character is your destiny. And by the time that you have been formed for decades and decades, those choices are not easy to make anymore. It's not, you don't have as many options. Once you've put on the Vader mask, your option is very clear. You execute the mission at the cost of whoever is in front of you, and you're now a slave to Palpatine. That's what it has become.
Right. And I love what you just said, the character destiny framing. Like we see the contrast between Obi-Wan, who was one of our classic magnanimous leaders in our previous episodes, and Anakin's behavior here is simply the ability to say, I screwed up. Like, I was wrong. I'm sorry that I didn't see what was happening. I'm going to change my behavior. Let me help you, right? In these movies, Anakin's totally unable to do that. He keeps closing those doors. If character is destiny, if you want to nurture a character in a specific direction, you're never going to make all the decisions right. You're never, none of us are going to conduct our lives so that we never get angry and we never piss somebody off and we never lash out and flame somebody or, ruin a relationship that would have been really good for us. Like, none of us will ever successfully navigate our whole lives without doing those things. We're all going to do the Darth Vader moments, right? We're all going to just be terrible beings at some point. But if you don't have the ability to look at that and go, wow, that was terrible and unskillful, and I shouldn't do that again, and I'm going to either apologize to the person that I hurt, or at least look critically at myself and say, I shouldn't do that the same way next time. I'm going to look at myself in the eye and go, all right, how do I not do this again? If you don't have that ability to course correct, then there's only one direction you go. And so that's kind of what we see is that, Obi-Wan in this series is portrayed as being able to say, I'm sorry, I failed you, but I still want to help. Right? Like, I'm sorry we're in this terrible situation, but let me help, let's solve the problem together. And Anakin is sort of the avatar of not being able to do that, of being able to say, no, I'm going to solve all the problems, and my black and white view of the world was the only one, and I'm really enjoying being angry right now, and I'm going to go solve the problems with my power, right? That only develops your character in one direction if you don't have the ability to course correct.